gentlemen, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. Jack Lord is with us. Rodney West is with us. I believe I'm Brent West. But now, who do we have? Who's this masked man?
You know who the Wookiee Luchador is.
That's right, the Wookiee Luchador.
And Rodney has been ducking me and ducking me and ducking me. And it's not he can't hide anymore. I will face him in the Coliseum. I will face him at the Omni. I will drag him back up to Buffalo, where the Beast of the East will put a beat down on the West.
Well,
in his defense, Rodney has not ducked you. He's really that short.
Oh, you make the Wookiee Luchador laugh and lose his intimidation factor. Mr. Lord, I have a question for you.
Okay.
How did you perform under one of these things?
Slowly.
Because just trying to cut a little promo on Rodney in the middle of a Buffalo winter, I'm dying over here.
I have to say, when you were doing that, I heard shades of Jody Hamilton there. At one point, I really did. Did you not hear it?
Yeah. I was trying to channel my inner Bill Eadie, but it doesn't work so well. Exactly. Even got the star on the mask. How are you guys? I missed you.
We are doing good. By the way, Brian Young with the Wrestler. Also, he has all kinds of interesting stories, and we're going to get into those stories in just a minute. But before we got to do a little plug. Before we go on further, we got to do our little plug for our show coming to Knoxville, Tennessee, Friday, March 18th, the Old City Performing Arts Center. LiveChampionshipWrestling.com. You can get your tickets. We've sold about 30 tickets so far, so we only have 192 tickets to sell. So make sure if you're going to go to come and see us on Friday, March 18th to get your tickets now. All right, now let's get to it. Let's get to to what you emailed me about. Jerry Lawler, Andy Kaufman, which we all probably will agree, tremendous angle, tremendous thing that happened in professional wrestling. Give you your story now about Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman.
Everybody remembers the Lawler-Kaufman angle primarily because of one incident, and that was the July 29th David Letterman appearance, 1982. Now, what you three probably know because of where you live is throughout 1983, Kaufman appeared 7 more times in the territory. Guess who doesn't know that? Anybody else in the country. Jerry Lawler may have been one of the great promoters, great promos, great in-ring performers, definitely great psychologist, dropped the ball on this one. This angle started in 1982. They could have gone national and big time with it before McMahon did, because it was 2 years away from Hogan, 2 years away from breaking through. They got national television exposure in New York, and the crowd popped for it, and they dropped the ball. That's my argument, and everyone says I'm crazy.
You know, there is some truth into that. They could have took this everywhere. There's no doubt they could have took this everywhere. But here was the problem with that, I believe, is people like Jim Barnett did not want show business involved with his wrestling business. I don't even think Vince McMahon Sr. did he?
Well, Kaufman went to McMahon first.
Yeah.
Kaufman, actually, my cat is attacking a box of my books, which is really disturbing because she gets mad when I talk wrestling.
Oh.
But he went to McMahon and he says, I want to wrestle on one of your cards. He didn't even say he wanted to wrestle one of their guys. He wanted to take his act of wrestling the women to a Madison Square Garden show. McMahon Sr. saying, look, people are questioning the business enough as it is. I put you as a comedian on the undercard. No one's buying the business from here on out. Which he was right. Bill Apter, the infamous Bill Apter, I don't know if you guys ever met Bill Apter. He is a character. Actually told Kaufman, you should call Jerry Lawler in Memphis. He'd do it. So he does. He calls Lawler. Lawler loves the idea because Memphis was not above doing goofy stuff.
That's right.
On their show. Didn't Frankenstein show up there at one point?
Yes, Dr. Frank. Yes.
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah, the
Frank,
mummy.
The mummy. Yes.
So
Prince of Darkness.
Kaufman goes there to do the angle. It gets all the heat they want. Where does it go from there? Lawler turns up the heat by saying, let's get a feud between you and I. Get it away from which Kaufman didn't want to do it first because I wouldn't either if I was Kaufman. But it worked. They did it. It was supposed to be a one-time thing. Lawler thought it was over until Kaufman called him several months later and said, hey, you want to go on Letterman? Jerry Lawler's thinking, well, yeah, but no one in New York knows who I am. This happened in Memphis, local. You've all seen the Letterman episode.
Right.
Yes.
What happens when Jerry Lawler comes out to that crowd?
Yeah.
They boo him like a wrestling crowd. That was not an applause sign or a boo sign. Lawler, the face in this card, was the heel in New York. And then he slaps Kaufman on the air, which of course makes him even more of a heel. They go back to Memphis where Kaufman's the villain. He's the heel. Lawler's the babyface. If they take that show to New York or Chicago or Los Angeles, role reversal. They're going to sell out any auditorium there with Kaufman as the face and Lawler as the heel. And it would have worked anywhere. And they were a few months away from Junior taking over the WWF. And you're telling me he wouldn't have jumped all over that?
Oh yes, he would have done it in a moment, But back then though, all the older promoters just I could tell you Ole Anderson would have had a fit if Andy Kaufman would have showed up on Georgia Championship Wrestling, which he did.
Lots wouldn't have done it. Some of the older guys, they wouldn't have done it. Obviously, your real hardcore old timers aren't going to do it. But those weren't the areas where they needed to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, Ole in Georgia wouldn't have let him do it, but you know what? Who cares? It's the same audience.
Yeah.
You need the big city audience, and it would have sold. And I mean, look at the people they got involved in it. I mean, when he had Kenny Patera as his partner against Lawler in Lexington. So they did Mid-South Coliseum. They did the Louisville Gardens. They did Lexington. But where else? It was a big mistake because Lawler could have been the guy to get wrestling because it was Memphis wrestling to go national before Vince did.
Yeah, I think you're right. Rodney, what do you think?
I agree so far with everything, but the Jim Crockett would not have done it. Period. Eddie Graham, no. Jarrett would have been the only one at the time, and they definitely capitalized on it. What they had in some of the most brilliant television that's ever been produced, with not only with Andy Kaufman, but Jimmy Hart was just unbelievable in this, and I think stood toe to toe with Andy Kaufman through the whole thing. And I agree, absolutely. They could have taken it other places for sure and shown the entire package like they had done. Lots of times they would take different angles from different territories and bring it in to Atlanta or to Florida, or what have you. But this particular one, they did not. They kept away from it. But Lawler and Jarrett and Kaufman left all the way to the bank for sure.
Well, they made so much money.
Yeah, I could have seen the Omni sold out with doing that. I could have seen it sold out. Because Jared Lawler would have been the heel there too. Because at the same, almost during the same
Well,
time period, uh, Lawler came into Atlanta.
Well,
And
my
so-
question would be, and I'm not trying to disagree with you on what you said, Brent, but my question would be, would it not have been more advantageous if he came to Atlanta, he did it against Tommy Rich instead of Jerry Lawler? Because Lawler was kind of regional, even though he had been in Atlanta before. Wouldn't it be better just to take the kind of the same process that they did with Kaufman in Memphis and use someone else that's over in the territory in Georgia? The same thing in Florida, same thing with Dusty Rhodes in Florida.
It
What
wouldn't
have
have
you.
worked.
You don't think so?
It was the Letterman appearance and the slap heard around the world that to this day, I mean, it always makes a list of the top 50 greatest moments on television.
Right.
People remembered that. It kind of put Letterman on the map. That was Letterman early in the Letterman show run. And it was an 11:30 show, but oh my God, word of mouth of that thing went nuts that, Kaufman not only got, B-slapped on TV, he came out with this tirade of vulgarities, which was so out of character for Kaufman. Even angry Kaufman characters never did that. People bought it.
Yeah, I think that could have took that everywhere, because not only did they play it that time, I think it was the first time they even played it again. So people could see it again. And I don't think that has ever been done on the David Letterman show or any Tonight Show for that matter. So
no, and they could have gone on all the talk shows. They could have, Kaufman could have appeared on the Tonight Show 2 weeks later in Los Angeles, and out from the back comes Lawler rushing the stage and tackling him, setting up a match at the LA Coliseum. I mean, it could have been done, and they could have done it with
allow that to happen again, though. Do you think like the actual television programs, like, because I don't think David Letterman didn't know what was going to happen.
No.
So, do you think if he showed up on it, you think they would even let Jerry Lawler in the building? Because
if he just started heckling him from the crowd or yelling at him, or showing up and making a big deal about it, you're calling him out, and it could have been Kaufman didn't have to perform. I mean, he could have always, whatever city he was in, could have got someone to fight Lawler for him.
Yeah.
Or, he could have showed up wherever Lawler was and attacked, which is what he ended up doing, but they never took it out of the territory. In 1983 was the biggest money-making year they ever had, in large part because of all the Kaufman-Lawler feuds.
Yeah. Jack, what do you think about it?
I got to agree with Brian on here. This was, I think it worked because of the two individuals involved. This, of course, Andy was the most pivotal part of it, but Jerry Lawler was the perfect foil, too. He was the one willing to go in there and work with this guy that had no training, really hadn't paid his dues. And, not many wrestlers during that time period would have even been willing to do that. Forget a promoter asking them to come in and do it. They're not going to go out there and make themselves look bad. Of course, Lawler didn't make himself look bad in that process anyway, but still he took care of the guy. So, yeah, I love this angle. If I had thought I'd forgotten we were going to talk about this, or I'd have wore my T-shirt with the poster from that event.
I'll tell you another thing why it could have only worked with Lawler. There was nobody else in the business at that time that could have kept up with Kaufman on the mic like Lawler could. Yeah. If every story is to be believed, and I asked a lot of guys I talked to researching the book about the Letterman episode, Kaufman went totally off script there. That is not what was supposed to happen on Letterman at all. Lawler was left to totally improvise everything. And Lawler had the two best put-down lines of the whole appearance were both by Lawler. Lawler out-comedied the comedian with his put-down lines.
Yeah.
The infamous, I'm not that kind of man. Well, what kind of man are you? I mean, most guys in the business weren't as good as Lawler on the mic to be able to keep up with a Kaufman.
He did well with that. And going into it, they were supposed to shake each other's hands and bury the hatchet.
Yeah.
But
And they did.
that's what Jerry Lawler believed was going to happen when he got there. But it didn't happen that way, and they just improvised that, and that's a lost art, because they did it just by looking at each other, knowing what they needed to do, and that's a lost art in wrestling. Tell us another story. You got another story. I know you've got some stories to tell us of a wrestler you talked to. Maybe it's in the book, maybe it's not in the book. By the way, The Wrestler's Wrestler, available on Amazon. You go get that now. It's a great book. Jack's got it behind him up there. Tell us some stories that we, maybe either book or maybe not in the book, that we don't
I
know.
can tell you one that I got today. Believe it or not, let me look at the clock. About 3.5 hours ago, I got a call from Terry Funk. I told you I talked to him like 3 times a week still. And on Ric Flair's podcast, he told this long story about Terry a couple weeks ago, about Terry staying at his home one night. So they were driving home after the event, and it's back when Terry was NWA champ. And I'm sure there was some beer involved, but Flair claimed that they stopped at a red light and it was late at night, and Terry got out of the car completely nude except for the championship belt and started directing traffic. So tonight I was talking to Terry, and I said, Terry, I got to ask you this question, because Flair's been talking about you on the podcast. And first all Terry said was, oh no. Tell him the story. Is this true? And I'll clean it up, because Terry doesn't always talk the most PG. That Flair is crazy. I'm like, so you're saying it didn't happen? No, I didn't say that. I just said that Flair is crazy. And then Terry said, did he tell you that his dog bit me that night too? So if you want to get that mental image of a naked Terry Funk directing traffic downtown.
That must have been an ongoing thing, because the Fargos used to do stuff like that as well. So that must have just been something that the 60s and 70s always brought apart from it. Because they would do that driving up to picture windows at restaurants, and they'd back up to them, and the guy would be in the trunk, and he would he would jump up all naked. And Don Fargo was the one that did that, by the way. Did you ever talk to Don Fargo in your?
I did not. I tried to talk to Don. I never got a chance to. It was paths never crossed right, because people would talk about Don, so I always wanted to say, hey, what's going on here? But I never did.
Crazy.
Yeah. Apparently everybody was crazy back then, except Bill Eadie, who everybody said, yeah, we don't go out and do this crazy stuff, and we'd look around for the star, and he was home sleeping.
Yeah.
So,
well, he knew, though, that he needed to protect the superstar.
Oh, yeah.
He understood that. Now, I don't think he did that when he was Demolition Axe as well, but he understood they'd fire him. If they seen him with somebody and they figured out who he was, they'd have fired him on the spot.
Anybody could have gotten away with going out and being crazy. It'd have been him, because no one knew who he was.
But he was such a big man. You would have been able to know something was going on.
I've stood next to Bill. He's not that big.
Him and wrestling too used to have some of the greatest matches. Them guys would beat each other. Wrestling too would always tell us, we'd hit each other so hard we couldn't even sell it. That's how hard we would hit each other. And it's just Superstar's a tremendous wrestler. Okay, now you've got to have one other story that's in the let's talk about just a little bit. We won't give it all to them, just a little bit in the book, and let's leave them hanging on the end of it, so they know that they need to go buy the book to
oh wow, that's
a little cliffhanger.
Well, there's a whole section of the book that Ron Fuller tells me about his first, I believe he was 5 days old at the first card he attended. So he was at shows from literally the time he was born, his whole life. And actually, this is not in the book, so I will tell it. He says, you got to remember, in my family, we were taught how to hook. You know, we knew how to stretch people. But as a promoter, I would always try to get one or two guys that were legitimate hookers so I didn't have to do the hard work. So I'd get these guys in that would get mad, and they would always try to test me. And I'm not going to give the name. He goes, but I'm working one night with this guy, and I guess he wants to take out his frustrations on me because he'd been getting, roughed around by some of the guys. So he decided to try to rough me around a bit, not knowing that I knew how to hook. And I got him down on the mat. He actually hit me with a couple legitimate, potatoes. He hit him with some chops that really hurt and tried putting a move on him. He goes, and I had him on the canvas, and I spun him and I twisted him, and then I felt something, and I looked down my leg, and it was everything he had for lunch coming down my leg from his trunks. So it's not always a clean business. Jack, do you ever have anybody poo-poo on you in the ring?
No, never actually had that problem.
We have
That's
seen
the
a Kevin
problem you
Sullivan
have.
match a time or two that smelled like that.
I'm going to have to tell Kevin that, Don't worry, he doesn't like me either because I'm a Yankees fan.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about just one little story in the book. That way, people can know what they're going to buy. I'm Amazon, by the way. Amazon.
Well, I'm curious because
Amazon right now for $18.75.
Is
what
there
was your favorite
also
part?
an audio version of this, right?
There is an audio version, but it's not my voice. Sorry, people.
Who does the voice in this for this audio?
It was a company that wasn't ECW Press, which they were shocked at because I think this was the first time one of their wrestling books had an outside company say, hey, can we do the audio version of this? So it was some New York actor, I guess. I don't know. I found him on Facebook and friended him. And he doesn't seem to want to talk to me, though. He's like, oh, yeah, I'll read your words, but I won't talk to you.
How dare you?
Kidding. He's a nice guy.
Man. I just noticed that the other day. I was looking it up and I saw there was an audio version of that, and I did notice it looked a little different. Did they even use a different cover?
They were supposed to change it back to the cover art of the actual book because I don't know if you saw the picture that kind of looked like a stick figure guy with his arm in the air. Yeah. It was like the worst cover I've ever seen for a book in my life, and I'm like, what is this? And they're like, that's the cover of your audiobook. I'm like, no, a 5-year-old drew that. I'm sorry if I'm going to get in trouble for this, people. I love you, ECW Press, but that was really bad. And
I noticed that, and I thought it was a different book because
you should have bought it again. Because I do get paid if you buy it again. I think I get a higher percentage with the audiobook too, so go ahead.
Really? That's good. Well, the audiobook is available as well. Jack, do you know what the audiobook is?
I did not look that up.
All right. So the wrestler's wrestler. He's going to tell us a little bit of just one little story, and you'll know what the book's all about.
As a performer, as one of the boys, what was Jack's big takeaway from it? Of all the stories from the guys in the business, what one came out to you as someone who worked there?
Gosh, it's been a while since I read it, so I can't remember all the stories individually. But I just remember the gist of it is about how much guys, they had fun, that they treated the business seriously. And I guess that's something that I heard from everybody. I was fortunate enough to sit in a dressing room with Lou Thez and so many other legendary wrestlers in their careers, and they were just fun to be around. But when they walked out that door, it was a whole different way that they carried themselves. They were all business.
And one of the things that amazed me about the book is like I said, I was brought in as the historian, and I focused a lot of my attention on 1970s and before and the people in it. And I also come from a boxing background. Primarily, I started out as a boxing journalist. Boxing is my main focal point in history. And when I started, I knew I had to cover the Antonio Inoki Muhammad Ali fight. You can't do a wrestling history book without that being in there. But what can you say about it that's not in there? I was actually, through boxing connections I had, was able to track down all the stipulations and rules back and forth, because no one knows what the rules for that fight were. And, was it a wrestling match? Was it an exhibition? Were they allowed to box? Were they allowed to punch? Were they allowed to kick about? No one knew. The two of them didn't know for sure going into it. So I was able to go on both sides, the boxing world and the wrestling world, the people that knew Inoki and the people that had worked in Ali's camp, of how the contracts were signed, how everything was put together, the negotiations, what the original agreements were. I don't think a lot of people know this. It was supposed to be a total work. Ali was going to go over and get beat by Inoki. And, the boxing world and this publicist said, you can't do that. You will destroy your own career. And Inoki, of course, was not going to fight Ali legitimately. So what we got was that bizarre exhibition of crab kicks that made no sense whatsoever. Interesting side note to that event is everyone forgets what the undercard was. Do you remember the undercard?
I don't think I do.
Was it Chuck Wepner?
Chuck Wepner versus Andre the Giant.
Yep.
Chuck Wepner told me, when I called him, he said, yeah, that's another thing Stallone stole from me and never paid me for. Because getting thrown over the ropes by the wrestler was me, just like everything else in the first two Rocky movies. But I was glad I could bring it, and I've actually had people comment that of all the things they've read about the Inoki Ali fights, it's always from the wrestling side, and to actually see the perspective from what the boxing side was. And it was major money. And everyone talks about it being a failed promotion because it was such a lame fight. It was not a failed promotion. Go look at the numbers. They made their money. Probably wouldn't have been able to do it again, but they made their money. Like I said, a lot of things in the book that didn't make the book are the negative stories, because I wanted the book to be completely positive. As Jack said, it's a love letter. But there are some fun negative stories that, let's just say you didn't want to upset Dick Murdoch in a bar at 3 a.m. I got quite a few of those stories from people. I also, Terry Funk would tell me stories about being a little kid living in a trailer with his father who was traveling, when Dory Sr. was traveling the country. And Gorgeous George would come over for dinner because he liked the way Terry's mom cooked. And he'd be a little kid, and, I would see this guy on TV with the curls, and there he is eating dinner at the table. And just the respect and the love those guys had. and how Lou Thez would come over to the house to visit Dory Sr. when he was in Texas. And then, 15 years later, Terry's wrestling him. In some early Terry fights, Thez gave Dory Jr. and Terry shots to get national exposure. And the level of respect these people had for each other in the business is amazing. That a lot of the younger talent that we focus on the book, once you get past a certain point, it's almost like they don't understand that legacy anymore.
Yeah.
Like the guys that were really current, as great as they are, they don't seem to understand that history. And it's like that candle's fading. Every couple of years, it fades a little more and a little more. You talk to Bret Hart and he will tell you about obviously being in the Hart family with Stu. But then he'll talk to guys like, Chris Jericho, who is still paying tribute to the people that he watched and how much he loved Hart and Shane and all these people. But one more generation, there's less of a inspiration by the game itself. Now they're inspired by stardom, being on TV. Yeah. And I think that's really sad. I think there are those that are great. One of the people I put in the contemporary stars that'll be a future legend was Jay White. Jay Switchblade was mostly in Japan, New Japan. His talent is so through the roof, but you never see him talking about or referencing anything from the past. And that to me is sad. I think history is lost on this generation. Whereas one of the things in the book that really comes through, especially when you're getting the quotes from the older wrestlers, how much what came before them meant and how it shaped who they were. Some of it's outright theft of an angle, of course. Ric Flair stole the Nature Boy, but that means he knew that history. But there's that level of respect that they all had for what came before them. And Jack, maybe you could speak to this. Is it the nature of the business now that the business is open?
I think, there's a lot of factors to it. I think there's just a huge disconnect between today's generation and the history of our industry. I don't think it's important to a lot of the younger guys. And when I say guys, I'm talking about men and women. But I just don't think it's important to them because it's not emphasized by the companies anymore that they work for. And the sad thing is that at your fingertips lies the entire history of our industry. And yet nobody wants to take the time to look anything up. I go and watch matches on YouTube, and the older the matches are the ones who fascinate me, yet they don't have that many views. And I don't get that. I just don't get it.
I love that a match will be called boring by today's audience because there's not 10,000 high spots. And it's like, yeah, well, those high spots make it not believable and really watchable. Yeah. A guy with 10 false finishes on 6 finishing moves, no one's really going to survive that. I would rather watch the Wild Bull Curry Johnny Valentine match, which is one of the great matches available on YouTube. And, I'm not a mark, but I'm yelling at the screen watching it to this day because you get into it so much, because you believed it. And that's another thing I think comes through in this book. At least I hope it does, because it was my intention, was that the people in this book are the ones that really made us believe. They might not be the biggest names. Some of the reviews we've gotten, you'll see people write, oh, how can they have a list of the greatest wrestlers without Hulk Hogan being on the list? Well, Hulk Hogan was great for the business, But Hulk Hogan is not a wrestler's wrestler. Jack Briscoe is a wrestler's wrestler.
Yep.
And, I've had people say, really? You put this person on the list of the greatest wrestlers of all time? I said, no, this is not a list of the greatest wrestlers of all time. This is a list of the wrestlers' wrestlers. These are the men and women that had the respect of their peers, that you came out from behind that curtain to watch. You wanted to see what they were doing. They might not have got the biggest push. They might not be the biggest star ever. Some of them were. A lot of champions on there. Harley Race, of course, Ric Flair, Dusty's on there. But not because Flair was champion or Dusty was champion. Because when they, especially in their primes, everyone on that card wanted to see what they were going to do. That's what makes a wrestler's wrestler. I got criticism from, not you specifically, but I could imagine you guys criticizing my inclusion of a Bob Roop. A lot of insiders will not put him on lists like this because of territory stealing incidents. But what he did in the ring as a performer, everybody on that card could learn from. Yeah. There were people that we spoke to that did not make the list, but their quotes are in there. And they needed to be in there. That were bigger stars than some of the people that were in there. I was lucky enough to talk to Baron von Raschke, and I love the Baron. And growing up, the Baron was one of my favorites. There's no way you're going to say he's one of the great wrestlers or performers of all time, but he sure as heck knows who is. Yep. And his story about Bruno, which, did I tell that the last time I was on the show?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. This is one of my favorite stories from the book. I've been rambling on so much, but
Oh, we've enjoyed every moment of this. When we have a good guest, we just get out of the way and let them do their thing. Go ahead.
Well, that's dangerous. That's really dangerous. Have you listened to my show? The only difference between that is on my show, I drop a lot of F-bombs. And I'm talking to physicists. I have Nobel Prize winning physicists and I'm dropping F-bombs too, but that's at the point. So the Baron tells me the story about when Bruno left New York and first went up to Toronto. And they knew they had to rebuild Bruno's career. And for those who are a little bit young or not know this, before Bruno was the WWF champion, he was a huge draw in New York, but something happened between him and Vince Sr. And he left the territory. They sent him to Toronto. Some people say they sent him there to kill him off. Other people say they sent him up there to become more polished. Who knows? It's so huge to begin with. But Bruno goes to Toronto and instantly he's over because a lot of Italians in Toronto. And Bruno was that charismatic and magnetic figure in the ring. I mean, you couldn't take your eyes off him. So he gets over big in Toronto, but he just gets up there. They're just trying to build him. And they called Von Raschke up from Detroit and said, hey, can you come in and, work with this guy, help get him over. Everyone hates you. It'll work, So he says, I'm working with Bruno and we're doing our thing. And it comes to the point where I'm supposed to get over and I'm kicking him and I'm kneeing him and I'm elbowing him. And every time I hit him, I'm feeling claustrophobic. And I hit him again and I look, and all four sides of the ring are getting closer. And I hit him with another cheap shot, and they all get closer. And I hit him again, and they all get closer. And I realize they really are out of their seats. And they're almost at the ring, and Bruno looks up at me and goes, you better let me take over now, kid. And as soon as Bruno made the comeback, every time he hit me, they backed up a step. Until they were all in their seats again. He goes, they were going to kill me in Maple Leaf Gardens for Bruno.
And I hate to interrupt, and that's something that today's wrestlers will never experience.
No,
They will
no.
never experience that. First of all, they don't want to. Secondly, they don't know how because they cannot make the emotional connection that Bruno could, or the emotional connection that Baron von Raschke could to the fans. And it's lost art, and they've lost it, and they're not in anywhere interested in finding it.
And here's another thing about it. You can make the argument that the Baron was not that great a wrestler. Well, he was actually. He was an Olympian, and he was one of the best the country produced at the time. Bruno wasn't a great wrestler. Well, maybe not, but he was one of the strongest human beings in the world at the time. If you couldn't believe in those two guys, there's something wrong with you. That's lacking now. I don't want to bash anybody in the business. I don't like bashing the product because anybody who has the nerve to get in the ring deserves the utmost respect. Anybody. And I say that in all contact sports or all forms of entertainment. If you have the guyans to do it, I'm not going to bash you. But who out there now do you believe could really do what they're doing like Bruno or the Baron could?
Brock Lesnar's the only guy that comes to mind for me.
The only one.
The only one.
And I would believe Brock Lesnar. I would not mess with him.
Let me read you something that Brock said in an interview this week. He says, I look at these young kids and I just don't know. Someone needs to step up, get over, figure out how to put butts in seats and not worry about your next high spot. Figure out how the heck can I be different? How the heck can I make money? That's the business. The young generation thinks that if they go out and do a certain move and they do it over and over and over, that is not the business. There is a good guy, bad guy, like Holyfield and Tyson, mega heavyweights, pitting people against each other, storylines make money.
Yeah. That's
There
the only
is
way
no
you get an
good.
emotional connection with someone.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore. Guys aren't developing their own characters because their promos are written for them. I kind of wish someone wrote my promo against Rodney because I really butchered it, but I was really hot under the mask. You can't develop your own character because they don't let you anymore.
Yeah.
Everything's cookie cutter.
And that's by design, by the way. They want to own that character, and that is by design.
Yes.
So that if you go somewhere else, it's very hard for you to recreate what you just left. It's very hard. There are certain people who have over the years, but they developed their own character. Hulk Hogan was, one of them. Ric Flair was another. Those were not something that they developed, and so it's difficult for you to go year after year developing a single identity, if you will, and most of which they don't even recognize it. They don't know who that person is. They'd be better off trying to sell themselves instead of trying to sell this phony made up person, as far as I'm concerned.
And that's what I don't understand about the business is Randy Orton might be the most talented of his family line, the most gifted natural athlete. He was probably better than his father. And Bob Orton Jr. was one hell of a worker and one of the most underrated workers, I think, in the history of the business. I'm glad he made the book. And remember, this book was not selected by me and Dan. This was everybody we talked to. We would get names. Who was it? Who was the, and the names that kept coming up were the ones that made the list. And by his peers, there was no one that worked with Orton Jr. that did not praise how great he was. And he would praise his father for being that great. But athletically, Randy was probably better than both of them. But everything he ever did is forgettable.
Yeah.
Granted, what we remember about Bob is the cast on the arm, but I think I actually start the chapter on Bob Orton about how it's very rare that a guy becomes a superstar when he's well past his prime. And I was a little nervous when he was reading that, but he called me and said he liked it. So
He was tremendous in Georgia.
Right.
Him and Dick Slater both were tremendous wrestlers. It's just it's a lost art of professional wrestling, and but they could come back. But it's not the wrestlers' fault. I do not blame the wrestlers.
No.
I blame the promotions for it because they don't allow any of them to do.
But that's why the book's called The Masters of the Craft of Professional Wrestling. Yeah. Not greatest wrestlers of all time. It's the masters of the craft. Because wrestling isn't just one thing. Yeah. You could have been the most gifted, talented, athletic guy in the world, but if you were boring, you were boring. No one was going to care. Yeah. You could be the most charismatic guy in the world, and you could get away with not being able to work for a while, but it didn't last. Hogan, say what you want about him. Go back and watch his stuff from Japan. Yep. Or even in the AWA. Hogan could work.
Yeah.
It's just by the time he got to the WWF, the business changed to the point where we don't want you to work. We want you to be this all-American hero who just shakes and then puts a beat down on someone. Yeah. But don't say he couldn't work, people. And a lot of people will argue that he couldn't work. He could.
Yeah, we have argued that point on here many times.
Yeah, well, they said Andre the Giant couldn't wrestle, but he could.
Go watch Andre versus Harley Race for the title.
Yeah, once he got to Vince, that's what Vince Sr. wanted him to do. What he started doing is what they wanted him to do.
Don't say the missing link couldn't work.
Yeah. There's so many. Yeah, and they didn't even know that he was one of the greatest wrestlers of all time.
And he was.
Yeah.
There are people that, by the time they ended up with, granted, a lot of times the WWF was the old folks' home for wrestling because Vince was smart. He took the established stars, those guys that had built up the names and legacy. By the time they had that name and legacy, they were all past their prime. Yeah. I mean, he tried everything he did to kill Dusty Rhodes, but Dusty still got over in polka dots.
Yep.
Exactly. Because Dusty knew how to get Dusty over. And they, no matter what, because I talked to him one time about it, and Dusty said there wasn't nobody, baby, gonna kill Dusty Rhodes. That's exactly what he said. He said they can kill Virgil Reynolds, but they ain't gonna kill Dusty Rhodes.
There is nothing funnier in the world. And I'll see if I can dig up the recording of it because I recorded every interview I had. I have them all on audio recording. There's nothing funnier than hearing Terry Funk do a Dusty Rhodes impression. Because he doesn't really change his voice. He just add the lift to it. And it is hilarious. Do you know Dusty lied his way into the business?
Yes.
Yeah. By using the Funk's name. First cards he got on, they're like, wherever you worked, I worked in Amarillo with the Funks. Everyone knew the Funks in Amarillo, so they believed him. No one bothered checking that he never worked for the Funks in Amarillo. He just played football with them. Which, by the way, another thing, people remember Dusty as this big fat guy in polka dots. Dusty Rhodes was an all-star football player, an all-star baseball player. Most people say Dusty's best sport was baseball. This was an athletic guy. So don't forget that, people. He also, I don't know what's with you Southern boys. I don't know how he got so over as the American dream because I'd be like, dude, that's like my American nightmare. I'm with superstar Billy Graham on this one. Sorry, I'm a New Yorker.
Dusty had that personality. He was able to connect. Thunderbolt Patterson was able to connect with people. And some Ole Anderson connected with people. Maybe differently than Dusty, but he connected with people.
Of course, no one wants to connect with Ole Anderson.
It's true. Talking about that, we're going to have to talk to our insiders here, but let's go see what they've got to say. They may have a question or two for you, and let's see. Can you stay on a little bit longer with us?
Absolutely.
All right, let's see who's Joel Bateman is with us. How you doing, Joe? Jason Mundy is also with us. Wendy Harkins. Good evening, guys. Hope all is well. Michael Barr is with us. Glenn Shelton. Richard Hood is also with us. Wendy Harkins. Good evening. Did we already say good evening? She already said good evening. All right.
She was doing a correction there.
Okay. Let's see. David Bice is with us. Good evening, guys. Ready for Knoxville? He got his tickets and he's ready to go. March 18th, Knoxville, Tennessee. Don is with us. Don Gardner. Hello again from Southeast Missouri. Well, we used to love that. We loved that little territory, that Kansas City territory.
Is it Missouri or Missouri?
According to where you're from.
That's right.
I'm from New
If
York.
you're from there, I think it's Missouri.
Hello, all from Glen Allen Shelton. Wendy Harkins said Rodney can't help it. He's short.
It's okay. He's still the champ, though.
That's
I can't
right.
pass him.
Chip belt back there.
He is the champ.
Rest in peace, Candy Divine. Yes, that was sad to hear. Candy.
Yeah, we also lost Mickey J, referee Mickey J, and independent wrestler down in Florida, Shooter Storm, also passed away.
Joel Bateman. Hello from Ohio. Michael Barr says, hello, Brian Young. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm just chilling here in Buffalo.
David Bice said, I seen two great shows this past weekend. Joe Kazana's, I think it's Wide World Wrestling, a Wide World of Wrestling or something in Sweetwater, Tennessee. And TWE, and I think that's in Ringo, Georgia. Am I correct in assuming it's Ringo, Georgia?
I believe that's right.
Jaden Newman. Glenn Allen said, rest in peace, referee Mickey Henson. Said, rest in peace to Andy Kaufman, because we were talking about Andy Kaufman. Truly respected and loved the wrestling business, by the way.
Yeah, sorry, insiders. I talked to several people about Kaufman when I was doing the book, and there's only a little bit about the Kaufman Lawler thing in the Lawler section of the book, but it came up quite a bit. And everybody I spoke to that was around during that time, or even guys who were around New York, because Kaufman would come and hang around the shows in New York, they said he was such a mark that he was like a little kid around the boys. And if you see, there's a great Letterman clip that he goes on with Freddie Blassie. And when Blassie's talking to Letterman, you could see Kaufman behind him looking at him like a little kid looking at a hero. Kaufman really loved the business.
Yeah, I think he respected it, and you could tell it the way that he presented himself as far as wrestling. He never, ever told anybody about professional wrestling. So that's saying a lot for a somebody outside the business. Knew it. I'm close to Memphis. Talking about Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler. Jack, remind the viewers of the passing of referee Mike. I think you just did. Richard Hood. They came to Atlanta with this thing and only didn't want to have anything to do with it. Yes. And actually, our father, Ronnie West, is the one that got the telephone call, and he knew I'm going to bring this to him, but I doubt very seriously this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Candy passed February the 9th, by the way. Candy was such a great wrestler, and she should have been pushed heavily everywhere she went because she was so good.
Yeah.
Mike Schaefer, hello from Mike Schaefer. Glenn Allen Shelton, he was 59. Is he talking about who's
Mickey J?
Mickey J was 59.
Yeah.
Hello, Jack, Brent, and Rodney. Glenn Allen Shelton, evidently from Mississippi. Jason asked the question, what do you guys think about Cody Rhodes leaving AEW?
Mind-blowing.
It is. It's kind of.
Well, I'm really not surprised in a way because, I'd heard about all their backstage roles being reduced. I think there was some ego involved there, and I understand that. And but I also read a report today about some money issues between he and Tony Khan. So, you know, who knows?
But will he go with Vince?
I believe that he will.
I don't know that I let him come back. I could be wrong.
Oh, there's been wrestlers that said so much worse than what Cody did.
This is
So I think he'll be all right.
all right, Jerry
Now,
Lawler.
Hunter may hit him with a hammer, but
Oh, I can see it now. Vince is be standing in the middle of the ring, drop his drawers like he's always done, and Cody will have to, let's just say, yeah.
Vince Jr. interviewed Kaufman ringside at Madison Square Garden before Kaufman went to Memphis. Yes, I do remember that. He was that was there's a photograph took, and I believe Freddie Blassie and I believe Paul Heyman was there with him. I believe he was actually doing the interview with for some reason was doing it on Freddie Blassie, and Andy Kaufman was with them. I could have dreamed that up. I'm getting old, so I could have dreamed that one up. But I'm pretty sure
Kaufman did that movie, My Breakfast with Blassie. Well, Blassie was with WWF.
All right, so that's probably the truth in that. Then Joel Bateman, Jerry Lawler, 50 years in professional wrestling. Go back and watch his stuff from the 70s. That is probably his best stuff he ever did in the 70s and the early 80s. He does some great stuff. Thought he was an executive at AEW, also Brandy. Well, they were, but evidently not anymore.
I think everybody will know.
Now, I could be wrong, but I believe the same thing's going to happen to okay, who was their champion for a while there? I always forget his name. He left, he got hurt, and now they say he's gone because he's hurt. What?
Kenny Omega.
Kenny Omega. I believe he will be gone next. I think the Young Bucks will go be next. At least if they're not gone, they're just going to have to be in the sidelines. I just think that's going to happen. You can't have the executive vice presidents of your company as part of the talent. It just doesn't work well in the long run, especially when people know it. It's one thing Ron Fuller owned Southeastern Championship Wrestling, but nobody knew it, so he could kind of get away with that. Michael Barr, why did wrestlers need managers? And did the managers make a lot of money from the crowds? I knew a few managers did very well. Well, usually they only had managers because they couldn't do the interview themselves on most occasions. Now, that's not always true. Don Morocco had a manager, Mr. Fuji. And he really should have been the other way around. Don Morocco should have been managing Mr. Fuji.
I think a lot of those managers had office jobs too, though.
I think they did, especially WWF. Good evening, guys, from Williamsburg, Kentucky. Not too far, Joe, from Knoxville. Good drive. We went to Williamsburg, Kentucky many times for wrestling. Lived in Knoxville. So Kaufman versus Rich is the last battle of Atlanta. Yes. Let's do a show on Buford Pusser. Walking Tall, ex-pro wrestler and sheriff in Tennessee. By the way, next week, Les Thatcher will be on here with us. And there's a possibility that he ran in to Buford during his time in wrestling. We'll talk to him about that and see if he ran into him. How long did he wrestle? Does anybody know?
Not very long.
I know after that
Buford the Bull. I'm not saying Les has been around, but I think Buford was a huge fan when he was a child.
The only Buford I know is the classic film Buford's Beach Bunnies. It was a great movie. 4 stars.
I like Buford T. Justice myself.
Andre interviewed on Letterman the night Hogan beat the Sheik for the title. Yes, he did.
Letterman was a big wrestling fan.
Yeah.
You can find clips of Killer Kowalski on Letterman, and apparently Letterman one of his first jobs in the entertainment business was as a ring announcer
Wow.
in Indiana.
He knew Bobby Heenan, if I'm not mistaken.
He did.
Yep.
And Dick the Bruiser was his big in the business. Yeah. So Letterman was a wrestling guy.
Tracy Bradshaw, Lawler was regional. Sums it up as Ric Flair said, just that when he came on Memphis Wrestling, never going to be a GCW director. At the time, Jerry Lawler was making so much money, he didn't want to go anywhere. But I'm going to tell you, it didn't take Jerry Lawler long to get to a territory. It didn't take him long.
I'm going to tell you, though, with Kaufman deal and from that moment forward till today, you can mention Jerry Lawler or Ric Flair, and just as many people will know one as they will the other.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, because they will say, "Oh, that's that guy with Andy Kaufman." Yeah, Jerry Lawler, Andy Kaufman. They remember that. It was a very memorable thing. I thought Letterman was great. He says you can say some of those words on television, but one thing you cannot do is throw coffee. I have said time and time again. Throw coffee.
Well, they are so intertwined. I'm an autograph collector. My entire apartment is covered with autograph pictures, and yet, I have one wall that's dedicated to wrestlers since I did this book. But yet, the one that's not on the wrestling wall that's in my main room is my Lawler autograph, which is the picture of him on the set of Letterman with Kaufman. That's how intertwined they are. I have him in a separate spot.
I've only got two. I've got Lou Thesz and Bill Eaton, and that's it.
And the one that he knocked down.
Yeah, and he just threw one of them off the.
I'm getting ready to hit the
bell. Let's see. I'm just going to go through. I think Pat Rose loved Don Fargo.
Yeah.
Remember, Pat Rose was a Fargo.
He was.
I don't know if he was Pat Fargo. I'm not for sure.
And Pat's been texting me during the show, wanting to know how to order the book. So I've been giving him the details. I don't know who's going to read it to Pat, but
Maybe he
There's
was.
an audio version.
No, was this after the? Yeah, after you mentioned the audio version, that might have been. He said, "Hey, I can read that now." Whoops! He knows where I live.
That was Rodney All. So the next time you see him, you can slam them down. And I did not say it. Brian did not say it. Jack didn't say it. Rodney did.
I'd like to see them get eye to eye because they're on that same level.
This is getting out of hand.
Do we have any nice questions from the crowd?
Let's see. I'm trying to because we're running out of time, so I'm trying to see if there's any question or something that we missed. Rodney, if you could look through them too, and let's see. Joel Bateman said Lou Thesz was a great wrestler. Hulk Hogan was a great entertainer. Yes, we're doing the top 100 wrestlers. We'll start that again in about 2 weeks. But I will tell you, Lou Thesz. People will be surprised where Lou Thesz ends up on my list. And where Ric Flair ends up at. So those whole people will be surprised on that one. Everybody's
comments here that deserve to be up there.
Hey, and real quick, I missed who said it, but they wanted to know if Harley Race and Lou Thesz ever wrestled. They did. Only thing on YouTube is a very short little clip from Chattanooga, Tennessee. But other than that, there's not much on
there. Let's see. Randy Orton. Kevin Penley said Randy Orton is aligned with a comedy wrestler. Why they put him in comedy?
He was a legit fighter, by the way, but is doing the biggest comedy act up there.
What was his name when he was an MMA fighter?
Matt Riddle. That's his real name.
That was his real name? Okay. I'd seen somebody that looked just almost like him I didn't know if he wrestled fought as Matt Riddle or not. So wasn't it Bob Orton Jr. and Slater who collected the bounty on Flair from Race instead of Kabuki? I'm not for sure.
That's Mid-Atlantic.
Dusty also played basketball. He actually played basketball as well.
Not a surprise.
He was a great athlete. People can say whatever they want to. By the time a lot of people saw Dusty, he was way past his prime in wrestling. But if you saw Dusty Rhodes in the 70s, Dusty was something to see. There's no doubt about it. Dusty and Thunderbolt had the fans in their hands. Yes, they did. Now, listen, folks, if I missed your question or your comment, please don't get mad at us. We're just running out of time. So I'm just trying to get down here and just get a little bit of people. Let's see. That Brian is a good-looking bloke.
I have to say, that is my Australian twin. It's
how do
a
you
friend
say
of
that
mine I
name?
met years ago through researching and research groups, and we'd been talking for years, and then we'd never seen what each other looked like, and oh my God, we're twins. So, very good-looking bloke. See? Right, Jeff?
Bill Watts was never completely sold on managers. Cordell and Akbar were the ones he used best. When Watts came to WCW, he hated Paulie dangerously, especially when he saw the contract Paul signed shortly before he arrived. And he eventually got rid of that contract. So that's what Bill Watts was brought in to do. He gets a lot of heat, but that's what he was brought in to do, to get rid of all the contracts that were high. And then once he does it, they get rid of him. So that's, that was the whole point of, and then Bill said some things he should have said down the line.
No.
Jason also said Gary Hart is one of the all-time greatest and most underrated managers. I would agree with that.
Yep.
Gary was so smart too. Knew what he was.
One of the best minds for the business.
Yep.
Oh, he was tremendous. If you want to try to get his book now, it's like $3,000. Do you have his book, by the way?
I don't. And I'm not going to have it now if it's $3,000.
Is it not expensive now if you want to buy it?
It's really expensive.
Yeah, so
and I don't know why they don't reprint it.
I guess maybe the family is not wanting it reprinted. I'm not for sure.
Well, you'd think they'd want some money. I would.
Let's see. Harry Stewart said it seems to me like Slater unmasked Wrestling 2 in a TV match one time. You couldn't see his face, but I think he did. In 1975, yeah, Dick Slater was tremendous. Best matches I ever saw was Dick Slater in Wrestling 2. Rome, Georgia, 8 weeks in a row, Thursday nights, the Memorial Gymnasium. Best matches I'd ever seen from the time I started remember wrestling from 1975 until I quit watching in about 2000. I did quit watching wrestling for about 14 years. I did not watch wrestling for about 14 years, but that was
I had to keep him updated all the time.
Yes, I did not watch wrestling. Well, we were doing the circus. We were promoting the circus, so we didn't have really time to watch wrestling. So,
Jason Hawkins. Jason Hawkins.
Where's this at, Rodney?
Right here. I'll put. Look what he's got. Look at this.
Whoa!
Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this.
Wow. You only have to send one. We'll share it amongst ourselves.
That's right.
That's tremendous. All right, folks, we are running out of time. Brian, anything you want to say before we leave?
I just want to thank you guys so much. Like I said, since I've done the book and I've made the rounds of a lot of shows, and I don't often go back on the shows because, much like the way a lot of the business has gone today, a lot of the talk about the business is the same way. And you guys, the love and respect you have for the game is what it's all about to me. And that's why I love this show, and I'll always be glad to come on. And when I'm not on, I'm one of the guys in the room like making snarky comments.
And we're happy to
have hey, man, I promise you, I'm going to do your show. You have just caught me, and I have been in my own personal pandemic for a month and a half now.
You and bad boy Barry Hardy, who says, hello to you guys, and nice guy.
Well, we thank you so much for coming on here, and we had a good time tonight, and I want to thank you, the wrestling fans, for watching our program. We certainly do appreciate it, and we do love professional wrestling. Me and Rodney grew up in the wrestling business. Actually worked in the business till 1996, maybe 1998. I'm not for sure now, but one of those years. But we certainly do love it, and that's the reason we're going to try to do an old school wrestling show on March 18th. So we can kind of at least try to bring a little bit of the old school wrestling back to the wrestling fans. Thank everybody. Rodney, anything you wanted to say before we leave?
No, I think we've got it. I think we got it wrapped up here.
Yep. Jack?
I'm good.
All right. Thank y'all so much, and we'll see you on the next week. Les Thatcher will join us right here on Pro Wrestling Inside Now.